The dust curled in coils as Sergeant Matthew Holbrook stepped off the chopper, boots hitting the cracked asphalt of Echo Base, a classified decommissioned military outpost tucked deep in the Mojave Desert. Once a hub for advanced weapons research during the Cold War, it had been sealed off and left to decay for over 3 decades, until now. The sky was a bleached, pale blue, hanging silently above the barbed wire fencing that snaked for miles. Sunlight made mirages dance in the distance. Despite the summer heat, Holbrook felt a chill creep under his camo fatigues. Something about the place was wrong. Silent. Too silent. "Sergeant Holbrook," barked a voice. Holbrook turned. Lieutenant Reyes, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and eyes that had seen too much combat, stood near a rusted jeep. She motioned for him to hop in. "You'll be briefed at command. Don't talk to anyone until then." As the jeep rattled down the cracked, sand-swept roads leading into the base's interior, Holbrook noticed the guard towers were manned, but none of the soldiers looked down. Their heads were rigid, almost frozen, like mannequins propped upright. Their mirrored lenses never turned toward the jeep. Reyes didn't say much as they drove. Holbrook asked, "So, what exactly are we doing here?" She kept her eyes on the road. Echo Base was sealed in '89 after a failed experiment. 6 months ago, satellite thermal signatures picked up movement inside. Unauthorized. But that's not the strangest part. She glanced at him. There's no sign of how anyone got in. The entrances were welded shut. No vehicles in or out. Yet we've been hearing noises. Voices on old frequencies. Morse code that doesn't match any known key. Holbrook frowned. "You think someone's still alive in there?" "No," she said flatly. "We think something never left." The command center looked like a bunker half swallowed by the desert. Concrete walls covered in flaking paint. A single rusted blast door opened with a hiss as they approached. Inside was sterile and cold. Rows of monitors, maps pinned with red thumbtacks, radio equipment with green flickering lights, and a few soldiers typing furiously with vacant, robotic expressions. Colonel Raddick, gaunt and pale, briefed Holbrook in the war room. "We need you and your team to sweep Sector 9, the lowest part of the facility. That's where the signals are coming from. You'll be the first to set foot there since the base was sealed." Holbrook nodded slowly. What exactly was this facility researching? Raddick hesitated. Echo Base was testing acoustic weapons. But the project was reclassified. They tried to manipulate frequency to disorient enemy troops. Sounds so low or so high, they couldn't be heard. Some of those tests opened doors we didn't understand. Reyes muttered under her breath, "They didn't just open doors. They invited something in." Holbrook's stomach turned. He glanced at the walls, where old portraits of generals hung askew. He noticed the eyes in the paintings seemed scratched out. Not by age, by intent. And that's when the first scream echoed faintly through the radio receiver behind him. It wasn't human. Holbrook stood frozen. The scream on the radio had no origin, no modulation, no digital distortion. Just a raw, guttural wail that cut straight through the speakers and into his spine. It didn't sound like a person or even an animal. It sounded like an absence of life. Something void. Colonel Raddick didn't flinch. "We've been hearing those for weeks," he said. "Same time every day. 2,200 hours. Always the same frequency, 1937 kilohertz. Always from Sector 9. Why hasn't anyone gone in?" Holbrook asked. "They have." Reyes answered grimly, arms crossed. 2 full squads. None came back. We only recovered body cams. And most of the footage is corrupted. Raddick stepped closer, placing a small flash drive on the table. "Review this with your team. Then gear up. Your wheels down in 90 minutes. Back at the temporary barracks, Holbrook sat with his hand-picked squad. There were 5 of them. Corporal Jennings, the team's comms expert, always chewing nicotine gum and talking too fast. Specialist U, the silent recon sniper with eyes like glass. Private O'Neill, the youngest but most eager, carried a crucifix and 3 lucky coins in his vest. Sergeant Diaz, explosives and heavy weapons, thick with muscle and mood swings. And finally, Holbrook, their leader, battle-tested but deeply uneasy. The team gathered around a cracked laptop, watching the recovered footage. The first few minutes were normal, static corridors lit by flickering fluorescents. Then came the whispers. At first, indistinct. Then, unmistakably clear. "We see you, still, here." O'Neill leaned in, brows furrowed. "Is that, backwards?" Jennings reversed the audio. The whisper now said, "Let us in." The video glitched. One of the soldiers in the footage spun around, eyes wide. "There's something in the walls," he screamed, just before his body folded in half backward, unnaturally, like a puppet with cut strings. The feed cut out. Everyone sat in silence. "I don't like this," Diaz muttered, crossing himself. "This ain't war. This is something else." Holbrook stood. "We follow orders. We get in, we document what we see, and we get out." You finally spoke, voice dry and slow. "If we're lucky." The elevator to Sector 9 hadn't moved in decades. They needed a portable generator to power it up. The corridor that led to it was dark, full of thick dust and half-burnt instruction manuals stuck to the walls. Every footstep echoed like it traveled through an empty cathedral. O'Neill tapped on the control panel. "This thing's older than my granddad. Hope it doesn't drop us into hell." Jennings grinned. "Buddy, we're already there." As the elevator groaned and descended, the light flickered. The numbers ticked past levels 3, 4, 5, then paused. The digital display glitched, scrambling into strange runes. "That's not English," you whispered. Diaz held his rifle tighter. "That ain't any language I know." Then the elevator stopped with a jolt. The door screeched open. Sector 9 had no lights. Just blackness so thick it looked like liquid. Cold air poured in like something breathing. Holbrook clicked on his shoulder lamp. It barely cut through the dark. And somewhere, down that hall, they heard the soft, tapping sound, like bare feet walking across metal. Slowly. Deliberately. Coming their way. The team raised their weapons as the soft tapping grew louder, echoing like a metronome of dread. It didn't rush. It didn't falter. Whatever it was, it knew where it was going, and it wasn't in a hurry. "Movement, 30 meters ahead," you whispered, eyes locked down her scope. Holbrook swept his flashlight across the corridor, but it barely touched the edges. The walls were smeared with something dark, like oil or congealed blood. Symbols etched into the metal pulsed faintly, as if reacting to their presence. Then the footsteps stopped. Total silence. Jennings exhaled. "Anyone else getting a high-pitched?" He winced, pulling off his headset. "It's in the comms. Something's feeding a loop through the signal." A burst of static shot through their radios. Then a child's voice whispered, "It's hungry again." Diaz cursed and fired down the corridor. The muzzle flash lit up something just for a moment, long limbs, too many joints, skin like charcoal. But it vanished into the dark before the sound of the shot faded. "You saw that, right?" Diaz barked. "Yeah," Holbrook muttered, checking his magazine. "Let's keep moving. Sweep in clear. Stay sharp." They moved slowly, boots clanging against rusted catwalks as they descended deeper into the sector. The walls closed in tighter the farther they went, littered with collapsed desks, shredded documents, and broken speakers that hissed with unintelligible murmurs. You found a sealed room. The door was dented inward, as if something had tried to get out. She motioned. Thermal shows faint heat signature inside. Small. Human-sized. O'Neill stepped forward. "Survivor?" "Doubt it," Reyes said over the comms. "There shouldn't be any organics left down there." Holbrook nodded to Diaz, who placed a breaching charge. The door blew open with a muffled boom, dust curling into the hallway like breath. Inside, a single light bulb swung from the ceiling. The room was filled with audio equipment, reels, tapes, monitors. In the center, strapped to a chair, was a figure in a rotted jumpsuit. Skin pale and translucent. No eyes, just empty sockets, stitched shut. The body began speaking without a mouth. A low garbled voice seeped from its chest, vibrating like an old phonograph. It echoes, in the quiet, it lives in the sound. Jennings backed away. What the hell is that? Suddenly, all their radios turned on simultaneously. Feedback. Screaming. Dozens of voices layered on top of each other, speaking different languages and groaning like old wood. Then, silence again. The stitched body collapsed forward. A pool of black bile leaked from its ears and seeped across the floor, burning through the metal tiles. O'Neill stammered, that was a recording, right? Just some old messed up tech? No, you said, voice flat. It was answering us. Holbrook forced his breathing to slow. Everyone, fall back to rally point. Now. We're not alone. But as they turned to exit, the hallway behind them was gone. Replaced by a pitch-black wall, seamless and smooth. Almost breathing. And then came a new sound. Something scraping on the ceiling above them. Crawling. The thing above them crawled in sharp, deliberate spurts, metal creaking under its weight. The sound was like dry fingernails on tin, echoing down the corridor like a warning. Holbrook raised his rifle and whispered, eyes up. The ceiling sagged with each movement. Dust rained down in little clouds as the unknown mass shifted above them, then thump, thump, thump. It dropped behind them, landing with a wet slap against the metal. Lights flickered in response, briefly illuminating the silhouette, twisted limbs bent backwards, a torso that pulsed like a speaker cone, and no face, only a mass of flesh pulled tight over where features should be. Jennings screamed and opened fire. The gunfire illuminated the hallway in violent flashes. The creature shrieked, except it wasn't from its mouth. The scream came through their radios, somehow bypassing their comms encryption. It was layered, harmonic, impossibly loud, like 1,000 voices screaming inside their heads. O'Neill dropped to his knees, covering his ears. It's in my brain. It's in my goddamn brain. Fall back. Holbrook shouted. They moved as one unit, laying down fire to slow the thing. You lobbed a flashbang behind them. The light detonated with a white-hot burst, and the creature howled through the radio waves again, distorted now, like a skipping track. The team ducked into an adjacent hallway and slammed the bulkhead door shut. Diaz activated the manual lock, sealing it behind them. Heavy breathing echoed in the cramped corridor. Jennings ripped off his headset and stomped it. I'm done with that thing whispering in my goddamn ears. Holbrook checked on O'Neill, who rocked slightly against the wall, still clutching his temples. What did it do to you? O'Neill's voice trembled. I heard my mom's voice. She's been dead for years, but I heard her. She was screaming from the radio. Screaming not to trust the walls. Diaz kicked a loose pipe. This whole base is cursed. No, you said quietly, flashlight scanning the next passage. It's alive. Jennings scoffed. What the hell does that even mean? Holbrook turned to you. Explain. You knelt by the wall, where veins, yes, veins, throbbed beneath the concrete skin. Faint pulses of electricity jumped between strange conduits embedded in the structure. This place isn't abandoned. It's a host. The sounds, the whispers, they're how it feeds. Jennings cursed. Feeds on what? You didn't answer. Because suddenly, the bulkhead behind them began to vibrate. Slowly. Rhythmic. Like something was breathing on the other side. Diaz aimed his launcher. I can blow us through the east wall. It looks thin, probably a storage room on the other side. Holbrook nodded. Do it. Fast. The charge detonated with a concussive thump. Smoke and shrapnel burst outward. The wall gave way, and they crawled through the wreckage into a room filled with suspended audio equipment. Cables hung from the ceiling like nooses. On the floor, a massive speaker, taller than a man, hummed quietly. O'Neill approached it. It began whispering in his voice. You were left here. Just like the others. Then came static. Then came the screaming again. And then, the walls began to melt. The melting walls dripped like candle wax, revealing layers beneath, metal, bone, circuitry, and something that pulsed like a heart. The air thickened with a sharp ozone tang, like burning wires and rotting flesh. Holbrook yanked O'Neill back from the speaker just as it began vibrating violently. A low hum rattled through the floor, shaking the dust from the ceiling. The pitch rose, a resonant frequency meant to destabilize. Ear protection, now. Holbrook barked. They shoved in foam plugs as you dropped to one knee, aiming her rifle. Sir, the sound is shaping the room. She was right. The very walls responded to the noise, panels warping, bending in time with the pitch. Like sound waves had physical force here. Diaz fired a shot into the speaker. Nothing happened. No crack, no shatter. Just a dull thud. The bullet sank into the black cone like it hit wet clay. And then the speaker opened, unfurling like a fleshy flower. A scream erupted from it, one so loud and layered it bypassed physical hearing altogether. It didn't hit their ears, it struck their thoughts. Images flashed in Holbrook's mind. Medical rooms. Men screaming inside containment tanks. Wires forced into eardrums. Sound experiments, people strapped down with their faces melting from ultrasonic exposure. Voices echoed. Project Chorus is not a weapon. It's an invitation. Do not transmit back. Do not answer. Then came the worst part, he saw himself. Sitting in that same chair. Eyes rolled back. Mouth open in a silent scream as 100 voices poured out of his throat. Holbrook tore his gaze away. We need to destroy that thing now. Diaz dropped a charge beside the speaker. Thermal gel charge set. They bolted through a side corridor just as the blast shook the entire room. The walls rippled like disturbed water, briefly losing their structure, like they were never truly solid. Jennings panted, stumbling behind the others. I don't think we're in Echo Base anymore. Holbrook paused at a turn in the hall. What? Jennings pointed behind them. That hallway we just came through? It's gone. Sealed. Like it was never there. They turned. He was right. The bulkhead had reformed, no seam, no entry point. The hallway had healed itself. You raised her voice. Sir. I think this place rearranges based on what we hear. Sound alters its structure. Meaning what? Diaz asked, loading a new clip. Meaning if we speak, if we breathe too loud, it listens. Holbrook looked at the others. From now on, comms stay off. Minimal talking. We move silent and quick. Jennings shook his head. We're not gonna find an exit if the halls keep shifting. We find the source, Holbrook said. Whatever's creating this frequency storm. We kill it. Cut the signal, kill the base. They moved cautiously down a new corridor, narrower than before. It looked like it hadn't been touched in 50 years. Graffiti lined the walls, coded phrases and desperate scrawls. Don't hum. Close your ears before you sleep. They echo when remembered. O'Neill lagged behind, rubbing his temples. I still hear them. Even with the plugs. Like a heartbeat in my skull. They reached a sealed chamber with a flickering keypad. You stepped forward, studying it. Looks like a frequency lock. We need the right sound to open it. Let me try, O'Neill said, stepping up. Before anyone could stop him, he began humming a soft, low tone. The keypad flickered and unlocked. The door creaked open on its own. Diaz stared at O'Neill. "How the hell did you know that pitch?" O'Neill didn't answer. Because his eyes were bleeding. The blood flowed steadily from O'Neill's tear ducts, a crimson trail snaking down his cheeks and dripping onto the cold floor. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. His humming stopped the moment the door opened, but something remained in his expression, still, slack, like his mind had been temporarily borrowed. "O'Neill." Holbrook grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. "You with me?" O'Neill blinked slowly, like he had forgotten where he was. I think I heard it whisper the note. Not words, just tone. It was in my head, like a memory I didn't make." You checked his pulse. "He's stable." But that wasn't just a lucky guess. Something fed him that pitch. "Then it's using him," Diaz growled. "Feeding him data like a signal repeater. That's not normal. He's compromised." "No," Holbrook said firmly. "He's still one of us." Diaz stared at him. "Until he isn't." The chamber beyond the unlocked door was unlike anything they'd seen. It was enormous, circular, easily 30 meters wide, with walls covered in tall, stacked servers and old Cold War monitoring equipment humming quietly. A faint electrical buzz hung in the air. On every surface, speakers were mounted like grotesque tumors, facing inward. In the center was a tall metal chair bolted to the floor. Leather restraints dangled from the arms. A skull sat in the seat, wires embedded in its jaw and eye sockets. Above it, suspended in glass and pulsating faintly, was a heart, not human, but something larger, blackened, veined with copper tubing. Every few seconds, it beat. And when it beat, every speaker clicked. Click. Click. "Jesus," Jennings muttered. "This must have been where they ran the primary experiments." You swept her light across the ceiling. "Look. There." A mural had been carved directly into the metal, grotesque, spiraling patterns mixed with glyphs, and symbols repeating over and over. At the center was a human figure with no face. Instead, its head was replaced by an open speaker cone. Jennings slowly translated some of the nearby text, his voice low. "The listener, born of silence, nourished by echoes, survives in static, thrives in memory." As they moved further in, the servers suddenly powered up, screens flashing with old terminal commands. "Initiating, Project Chorus. Subjects, 36. Survivors, 0. Broadcast status, live." Diaz approached the chair, inspecting the embedded wires. "This thing isn't off. It's still broadcasting something." You pointed toward the back wall. "That tunnel there, it's not on the blueprints. Leads straight beneath the core." Holbrook turned toward O'Neill. "You okay to move?" O'Neill nodded shakily, his voice brittle. "It's quieter now. Like it's listening." They advanced through the tunnel, the walls growing smoother, less industrial. More organic. Veins again, but now visibly pulsing. As they walked, the silence became unnerving, deafening, like the air had thickened into velvet. And then came the whispers. Not in the air. In their heads. "Why did you come? You brought the noise. We only echo." Suddenly, Holbrook's flashlight flickered, then died. All others followed. In total darkness, the whispers turned to voices. Screams. Memories. Their own. Use voice, "Mom, don't leave me." Diaz, "I didn't mean to kill him." Jennings, "Get out of my head. Get out." O'Neill fell to his knees, clutching his ears as something behind them stirred in the black. The darkness responded with breath. Not human breath. Something enormous had awakened. A low, guttural rumble filled the passage, too deep to be a growl, too deliberate to be a machine. It didn't reverberate through the air. It shook something deeper, like it crawled across bone and into the marrow. "Stay close," Holbrook whispered, flicking his flashlight repeatedly. Nothing. Total blackness. No light. No sound but the voices, no, their voices, looping back at them, layered and slowed. We brought this. We echo. We are your sound now. Something moved ahead. Not with footsteps, but like a pressure in the dark, displacing space, pressing against their lungs. Jennings started breathing faster. We're not gonna make it out of this tunnel. Shut it. Diaz snapped. No, you don't get it. Jennings' voice broke. That thing knows what we're thinking. It's mimicking us. It's making us hear ourselves, like we're already dead and don't realize it. O'Neill let out a whimper. It's trying to erase us, echo over us. Then, U-scope flashed a faint infrared flicker. Movement, 20 meters ahead, she said, slowly reaching for her sidearm. It's big. A shape slithered forward, so massive it took up the tunnel's entire ceiling. It dragged itself soundlessly, dozens of spindly limbs fused to its body, arms ending in jagged speakers where hands should have been. The head, if it had one, was a swirling void, a vortex of compressed static. Suddenly, their radios flicked back on with a burst of searing feedback. Screams. Laughter. And then, listen to me. The voice came from every direction. Not loud, but absolute. Like command given form. The group collapsed, ears bleeding despite the plugs, vision swimming. The creature pulsed, and every word it spoke etched itself into the walls. Jennings began convulsing. His headset melted into the skin around his ears. O'Neill screamed, it's broadcasting through him. You fired, a perfect 3-round burst. Jennings dropped. Dead. The tunnel dimmed again. Silent, but charged. Diaz stood over Jennings' body, breathing heavily. What the hell is this thing? Holbrook rose slowly. It's not just feeding on sound. It's building a copy of us. Using our voices, our thoughts, like input. Then we cut the signal, you said, reloading. Find the core and shut it down. They pressed forward, the corridor giving way to a new space, massive and spherical, lined with cracked glass domes and rusted antennae. At the center floated a monolithic cube of black metal suspended by magnetic fields. Thousands of copper wires snaked into it like a womb. Across the cube's surface, faces. Dozens. Human. Mouths open in mid-scream, eyes rolled back. The core. Diaz stared at it. This is it. The source. O'Neill trembled. We can't destroy it. It's broadcasting us now. Holbrook turned to him. What do you mean? I can hear it, in me. It's rewriting who we are. If we destroy the cube, it may take us with it. Or leave only the parts it's recorded. You aimed her rifle. Then we end it before it finishes the loop. Diaz moved toward the base, planting the last of his thermal charges. This better work. Suddenly, a tone rang out. Pure. Perfect. It shook them all to their knees. And in that moment, the cube began to sing back. The cube's song didn't sound like music, it sounded like mourning. A resonant wail, layered with frequencies both above and below human hearing. It vibrated the floor, their bones, and something far deeper. The walls of the chamber quivered. The copper wires began to move like tendrils, slithering down from the ceiling and walls toward them. Not fast. Not frantic. But with terrifying intent. O'Neill collapsed to the floor, screaming. It's trying to overwrite me. It's inside my voice. Holbrook grabbed him, shaking his shoulders. Fight it. Stay with us. You stepped in, injecting O'Neill with a combat-grade tranquilizer. Buy him some time. Diaz yelled over the growing hum, we don't have time. The charge is set. 30 seconds. Then, from the cube, a face formed, a shifting amalgamation of all of theirs. Holbrook's eyes, Yu's lips, Diaz's jaw, O'Neill's bleeding ears. It spoke in a composite voice. We were here before the sound. You are only echoes. We are what remains when memory fades. You fired into the cube, round after round. Sparks flew, but the structure absorbed every hit, rippling with heat but not breaking. The walls cracked as the suspended speaker flesh creature from the tunnel slithered in behind them. It no longer crawled. It floated, like a shadow made from pressure and noise. Diaz, blow it. Hallbrook screamed. Diaz slammed his detonator. Nothing. The cube pulsed once, and the detonator melted in his hand. Flesh and plastic fused, hissing. Diaz fell back, screaming in pain. It knew. It knew we were going to detonate it. It's one step ahead of us, you snapped. It's predicting based on sound patterns. Thought loops. Memory feedback. Hallbrook stared up at the swirling patterns above. The mural. The glyphs. The warnings. Then we give it what it can't predict, he muttered. You turned to him. What do you mean? We stopped thinking. Stop remembering. We cut the loop. He pulled a cable from his vest and jammed it into the access port beside the cube. I'm flooding it with random noise. Chaos. White static. No patterns, no meaning. No thought for it to mimic. The cube pulsed in anger. The tendrils recoiled. The face on the cube twisted, losing cohesion, glitching, eyes blinking out, mouth splitting sideways, voice warping into garbled nonsense. WHO, is the echo now. You rushed to Diaz, dragging him toward the exit tunnel. The chamber began to collapse, steel girders bending inward. Hallbrook watched as the cube screamed, a pure, vibrating tone that pierced every fiber of the air. Go, he yelled to the others. I'll detonate the fallback charge manually. O'Neill, half-conscious, reached toward him. Sarge. Hallbrook forced a smile. I'm just a memory now, kid. Get out of here. The last thing they saw was Hallbrook turning toward the cube, pulling the final grenade from his belt. The explosion wasn't loud. It was silent. A pulse of absence. A gap in sound. You, Diaz, and O'Neill emerged from the service tunnel 2 levels up, gasping under the red emergency lights. Their radios were dead. The walls no longer pulsed. And far away, deep within the metal bones of Echo Base, the humming finally stopped. The emergency lights buzzed above them, dim, sputtering red glows barely illuminating the aftermath. You helped Diaz sit against a wall while she ripped cloth from her uniform to bandage the melted skin on his hand. O'Neill lay curled on the floor, pale and shivering, eyes glassy. No sound. No movement. Just the subtle creak of the cooling walls around them. You checked her comms. Still dead. Diaz looked at her. Do you think he did it? That Hallbrook really stopped it? You didn't answer right away. She glanced down the tunnel they'd come from, eyes focused, calculating. Then she finally said, he bought us time. Whether it's over? I don't know. O'Neill sat up slowly, his voice thin. I can still hear something. Not loud. Just residue. What do you mean? Diaz asked. O'Neill blinked, dazed. It's like when a song gets stuck in your head. But this one hums back when I forget it. It wants me to remember. You frowned. If it's still alive in you, we can't leave Echo Base. Diaz cursed under his breath. We're not dying here just because some audio ghost decided to hitch a ride in his skull. You stood, voice steady. We'll get him to the calm tower. If we can signal command, they'll extract us. Quarantine protocol. O'Neill spoke softly, you'll bring them here? Back to it? You met his gaze. We'll warn them. Not every voice wants to be heard. They moved in silence, navigating corridors that no longer rearranged themselves. The pulse of the walls was gone. Doors remained doors. No flickering images. No disembodied screams. But that didn't bring comfort, only a feeling of something waiting. They reached the upper level's long-abandoned calm tower. It groaned in the wind, a skeletal structure overlooking the desert. They climbed the cracked stairs, equipment crunching under their boots. You found the console barely functional, half its circuits fried by feedback. But she worked fast, bypassing security using Hallbrook's manual override code etched into her wrist pad. A brief crackle. Then a connection. Echo command, this is you. 3 survivors. Base compromised. Threat neutralized. Possible contamination, requesting level 5 quarantine and retrieval. Immediate evac. Static. Then a cold voice answered. Copy, you. Extraction inbound. Maintain silence. Do not transmit again. O'Neill flinched. That voice, he whispered. That wasn't command. That was me. You slowly turned to him. His eyes were wide. Bleeding again. Diaz raised his weapon. He's broadcasting. No, O'Neill whispered. It's not me. It's what I remember. From the speaker came a warped version of O'Neill's voice, delayed, stretched like audio tape melting. Silence is not the end. It is where echoes begin. You stared at the radio, stunned. The comms had relayed the cube's voice. Their signal hadn't gone to Echo Command. It had gone outward. Beyond the base. Beyond Earth. Shut it off. Diaz shouted, smashing the console with the butt of his rifle. But the signal had already gone. A single transmission. Encoded in grief, memory, and loss. Carried by the strongest force left in the world. A story told through sound. The silence that followed the smashed console was heavier than any scream. You stared at the sparking wires, her expression unreadable. Outside, the wind howled through the broken antenna spire of Echo Base's comm tower. Diaz paced beside the wall, rifle still raised, watching O'Neill like a bomb waiting to go off. No rescues coming, you muttered, the realization solidifying in her voice. We didn't call for help. We sent an invitation. O'Neill leaned against the wall, pale and twitching. It wasn't just my voice, it was Hallbrook's too. And Jennings. Everyone who died down there. It stitched us together and sang through us. Diaz didn't lower his weapon. That thing's still in him. We should put him down now before he spreads it further. No, you snapped. Not unless we're sure. He hasn't hurt us. That means he still has control. O'Neill's head dropped, a thin smile on his lips. That's the trick, Sergeant. You won't know when I lose it. That's how it wins. That's how it echoes. Before Diaz could respond, a sharp ping came from above. They all looked up. Chopper blades. A black silhouette descended from the high desert sky, cutting through the wind, unmarked, quiet, and wrong. Too quiet for a helicopter. No rumble. Just vibration. You narrowed her eyes. That's not command. The aircraft hovered, lowering slowly onto the helipad outside the comm tower. Its landing gear hissed as it touched down. A door slid open with a metallic sigh. Inside, darkness. No pilot. No lights. Just an open interior and the faintest trace of humming. Diaz stepped forward, hesitated. We're supposed to get on that? You said nothing, staring into the open hatch. From the dark interior, the comms flared to life once more. O'Neill's voice whispered through the headset around you's neck, but he wasn't speaking. Echo, bass, is just the first note. The song is not over. She turned to him. He looked stunned. Frightened. I didn't say that, O'Neill croaked. I swear to God, I didn't. Diaz turned to you. We leave him. End of story. He's compromised. You didn't move. From the chopper, the voice of Colonel Raddick called out. You. Diaz. O'Neill. Debrief awaits. Raddick was dead. They'd seen the logs. You took a step back. No, she said aloud, eyes wide. No, this isn't extraction. This is infection. It's trying to leave with us. The humming inside the chopper rose slightly. Not a machine. A signal. Suddenly, O'Neill clutched his chest, eyes rolling back. It's broadcasting through me again, he groaned. I can feel it trying to spread. It needs a carrier. You grabbed Diaz's arm. Help me get him downstairs. Seal him in the audio chamber. He stays. Diaz hesitated, but nodded. They dragged O'Neill, twitching and moaning, back through the corridors. The base moaned along with them, walls groaning like a ship under stress. As they neared the chamber where Holbrook died, O'Neill stopped struggling. He looked up. Calm. Smiling. You hear it now, too, he said. The world will. In time. They strapped him to the very chair that once held the first subject, the cube's throne. You locked the restraints. Don't let me out, O'Neill whispered. Even if I beg. Even if I sound like myself. She nodded once. Diaz handed her the last backup charge. One push. If he starts transmitting again. They turned away. Climbed back toward the light. And the moment they stepped outside, the chopper was gone. No marks. No wind. Just the smell of ozone, and a faint vibration deep beneath the sand. The morning sun bled slowly across the horizon, casting long shadows over the barren outskirts of Echo Base. You and Diaz sat atop a collapsed guard post, scanning the desert through infrared scopes and field binoculars. Not a single sign of command. No radio chatter. No rescue convoy. Just miles of flat dust, fractured rock, and silence. But beneath that silence, something pulsed. Diaz tightened his grip on the scope. You think it's gone underground? Like, moved on? You shook her head slowly. It didn't move on. It was always underground. We just woke it up. They'd sealed O'Neill inside the acoustic chamber 20 hours ago. Since then, neither of them had spoken more than a few words, waiting, listening, watching the base for signs of a breach. It had gone quiet. Too quiet. Inside the chamber, O'Neill hadn't made a sound. Not a word. Not a scream. But then came the dreams. Diaz was the first to mention it. He jolted awake in the middle of the third night, drenched in sweat. I heard him, he gasped. I heard him in my sleep. He was talking to me, no, singing. You didn't respond. She had the same dream. Not just O'Neill's voice, but dozens, some familiar, others lost to the records. Murmurs from deep inside the earth, voices echoing through rock and time. A language not meant for ears, but remembered by the bones. I think it's not sound anymore, you finally said, staring at the horizon. It's memory. Whatever we heard, whatever that cube was, it doesn't need audio anymore. It's inside us. Replaying itself like a loop. Trying to grow. Diaz stood. We need to finish this. Permanently. That chamber's a risk. He's a risk. You looked toward the half-buried structure. Maybe, she said. But we need to understand it before we destroy it. Or it comes back stronger. Diaz didn't like that. He kicked a rock hard into the dust. This is how horror movies start, you. We survive, we warn no one, and we die in the next act. You really want that to be our arc? Before she could answer, her portable sensor let out a faint ping. Movement. From inside the base. Her eyes narrowed. Stay here, she ordered, and started down. Back in the dim hallway, you passed the corpses of collapsed panels, emergency wiring, and the scrawled black marker Holbrook had used to document his descent into madness. You don't hear it with ears. You hear it with the things you've lost. She approached the sealed chamber. Her hand trembled as she hovered it over the keypad. O'Neill, subject 0. A soft hum came from the door, not mechanical. Not alive. A memory, vibrating. She opened the intercom. O'Neill? She asked. No answer. Are you still in there? A faint shuffling sound. Then, a whisper. But it wasn't O'Neill's voice. It was her father's. You used to sing when you were scared, remember that? You were brave then. You're brave now. Her breath caught. Who are you? She demanded. You already know. You carried us all back with you. The intercom cut. You staggered back from the door, heart pounding. It wasn't broadcasting from inside the chamber anymore. It was inside her. Inside the survivors. You burst out of the corridor, boots scraping against cracked concrete. Diaz was already at the base of the tower, rifle raised, scanning the perimeter. She stumbled toward him, gasping for breath, sweat clinging to her neck despite the cold desert morning. Diaz caught her arm. What happened? Is he still in there? She didn't answer. Not at first. Then, I heard my father's voice. Through the intercom. Diaz's jaw clenched. Your father's been dead for 5 years, you. I know. They stood in silence, staring back at the long stretch of corridor they'd just escaped from, the air heavy with the weight of the impossible. I don't think it's just sound, she said softly. Not anymore. I think the cube, or whatever it was, tapped into something else. Not just frequencies. Memory. Emotion. Loss. It uses that to spread. Diaz turned to her, eyes wide. So, what, it's like a virus? A psychic contagion? More like a loop, she said, voice low. A loop of unresolved memory. It finds grief, pain, guilt, amplifies it. Repeats it until you believe it's real again. Diaz staggered back. That means everyone in that base, everyone who died here, they're still broadcasting. And we're just the latest receivers, she replied. Suddenly, the tower lights flickered. The generator, dead for days, roared to life for a brief, haunting moment. A loudspeaker crackled. Then a voice. A little girl's voice. Daddy? I'm cold. Please come home. Diaz's rifle dropped a few inches. His lip trembled. You grabbed him by the vest. That's not real. You said you didn't have a daughter. I don't, he whispered. But I dreamed of her last night. Felt her. Yu's eyes darkened. That's how it spreads. It gives you something you want. And then it rewrites you. The tower speakers screamed with static. Dozens of voices burst out in a chorus of overlapping fragments. They left me here. We're still underground. Can't feel my legs. Echo. Echo. Eck. She ripped the wires from the generator panel, silencing the tower in a single violent burst of sparks. Smoke filled the stairwell. We can't let it broadcast again, she hissed. Not even one more time. Diaz was shaking, staring at the pliers in her hand. He said carefully. What if we're already broadcasting? She froze. Her skin went cold. If they'd heard the signal. If they'd dreamed the voices. Were they now carriers? The bass behind them rumbled again. The ground shifted. A low groan vibrated from deep beneath the surface, as if the earth itself were playing back an old record. Something ancient. Something buried. And now awake. The tremor grew. Dust trickled from the broken light fixtures, and the remaining structures groaned like dying animals. You grabbed Diaz and pulled him toward the central access lift, the only path that led directly down into the sublevels. The facility's classified underbelly had remained locked since the incident, but now, it was opening on its own. The lift door screeched upward, revealing a dark shaft bathed in red emergency glow. Cool air, dry and metallic, rushed upward like breath from a corpse. You swallowed hard. If we're broadcasting, the source is down there. The signal's not coming from O'Neill anymore. Diaz clicked on his shoulder lamp. Then we shut it down. For real this time. They descended together, rifles raised, boots clicking on rusted steel as the elevator dropped slowly into the abyss. Neither spoke. There was only the faint hum of the lift's motor and the distant sound of a voice humming something like a lullaby. As they reached the bottom, the door slid open with a sigh, revealing a long corridor that hadn't been entered in decades. Pipes bled condensation. Chains hung from the ceiling, swaying gently, though there was no wind. You held up her scanner. The entire screen glowed red. Massive interference, she whispered. Something's alive down here. They moved in sync, clearing each corner. Rooms to their left and right were filled with strange hardware, reel-to-reel tape machines still spinning, even with no power, archaic oscilloscopes flashing impossible waveforms, notes scribbled on parchment, not paper. Project Karen, Phase 3 initiated. Language acquisition complete. Oral pathways bypassed, temporal feedback positive. Diaz stared at the blackboard, where someone had carved a phrase repeatedly into the plaster. If you hear yourself, run. You glanced toward the far wall. A circular vault door stood slightly ajar. Faint static hissed from within, like the world's oldest recording playing in reverse. She stepped closer. The air changed. It grew thick, as if reality itself was stretching. Time stuttered. Her flashlight flickered, and for a moment, Diaz's face melted into someone else's. A woman. Then a child. Then, back to Diaz. He hadn't noticed. But she had. The vault door groaned wider, revealing the true heart of Echo Base. Inside was a chamber of concentric rings, all lined with worn-down speakers and bone-white wires, thousands of them, tangled like vines. At the center was the source, a floating cube of polished obsidian, pulsing with every footstep they took. From its edges, the voices bled out. You made us forget ourselves. You opened the door. It will never be quiet again. You dropped to one knee. Her nose bled. Diaz groaned, clutching his ears. It's inside my teeth. The cube rotated slowly, and in its reflection, you saw not herself, but O'Neill. And behind him, the entire original team, silently screaming. She whispered, they didn't die. They were recorded. The realization hit you like a punch to the gut. They didn't die, she repeated, voice trembling. They were archived. Imprinted into the signal. Diaz staggered, back hitting the wall as he slid down, blood leaking from one nostril. You mean, they're stuck in there? Conscious? The cube pulsed, its obsidian surface rippling like water disturbed by a scream. From within, the whispers turned to guttural sobs, fractured human sounds trapped in endless loops. I was here first. Why did you leave me down here? Make it stop, make it stop, make it. You gritted her teeth and turned to Diaz. We have to destroy it. Burn it. Blow the whole sublevel to hell. He shook his head. We don't even know if it can be destroyed. If it's quantum or... Don't give me science right now, Diaz. Give me options. He reached into his side pouch and pulled out 2 bricks of C4, taped with shaking hands. I brought them in case we found O'Neill. Or worse. You nodded. Set them around the base of the chamber. And fast. As he moved, she studied the cube. Her reflection warped, eyes too wide, mouth whispering words she didn't say. The cube responded, twitching on its axis as if it could see her, feel her memories. A new voice emerged, clear and singular. You, stay. We remember you. Her heart froze. You came here before, remember? Before the silence. That wasn't possible. She'd never been to Echo Base before this mission. But suddenly, flashes. A little girl being lifted into a truck. A woman in uniform whispering in her ear. A spinning cube. A voice, like her father's, say goodbye to the past. Say it now. No, she whispered. No, that never happened. That's not my. It's yours now. Diaz returned, face pale. Charge is set. 30-second delay. You raised the detonator, but the cube surged with power. The lights in the room exploded, bathing everything in strobing darkness. Reality buckled, walls flickering like unstable video, voices spilling from the very metal around them. Then she saw it, O'Neill, standing at the chamber entrance, skin glistening with sweat, eyes black as oil. You're too late, he said. But his mouth didn't move. The cube was speaking through him. Diaz leveled his rifle. That's not O'Neill anymore. You pressed the detonator. Beep, beep, beep. The cube shrieked. O'Neill's body lunged forward in one final desperate attempt. And then everything turned white. A soundless, pressureless flash. Then. Nothing. You awoke on her back, buried beneath layers of dust and crumbled steel. The air was hot, dry, and tasted of burnt plastic. Every breath scraped her lungs like sandpaper. She coughed violently and pushed the debris off her chest. The chamber was gone. No sign of the cube. No concentric speakers. No O'Neill. Diaz lay a few feet away, unconscious but breathing. His uniform was scorched, one of his sleeves half gone, revealing angry red burns beneath. You pulled herself up. Everything around her looked wrong. The walls were warped, melted, as if reality had liquefied and then rehardened into a different shape. What had once been metal panels were now smooth like glass, yet humming, alive somehow. No sound came from the comms. The emergency lights flickered in slow, unnatural patterns, like they pulsed in response to her heartbeat. Diaz stirred, groaning. Did it work? I think so. But her voice didn't echo. Not at all. She stopped. That was the first sign. Even in this ruined space, a sound should bounce. She clapped. Nothing. No echo. Diaz, she whispered, helping him sit up. The echo's gone. He blinked. So, we won? But you couldn't answer. Her eyes fixed on the far wall, no, what should have been a wall. Instead, it was a mirror, smooth and silver, reflecting not their movements but something else entirely. Their reflections moved slower, out of sync, like marionettes trying to catch up. Diaz noticed it too. What the hell is that? The figures in the mirror looked just like them, but they weren't hurt. Their gear was pristine. Their eyes were wide with terror. And their mouths were moving. Run. Behind them, deep within the distorted walls, a low vibration started. Like something vast was waking up. Something that had been buried beneath even this chamber. Something that hadn't been meant to hear the signal, but had responded anyway. You turned to Diaz. We need to move. Now. They scrambled out through the damaged hallway, following the emergency signs lit dimly in red. The walls watched them, the feeling was undeniable. At one point, you swore she saw her own face bulging from the metal, mouth open in a silent scream. Whatever had been trapped in the cube, some of it got out. Not just voices. Not just memories. Something else entirely. They reached the elevator shaft, but the lift was gone, obliterated in the blast. Diaz peered down. We'll have to climb. You nodded, breathing heavily. Then we climb. As they began their ascent, the lights in the shaft dimmed, and the humming followed them. Like it knew their names. The elevator shaft felt endless. Yu's hands ached as she pulled herself upward along the service ladder, each rung coated in soot and grime. The steel was warm, too warm, like it had absorbed a fire that hadn't quite gone out. Diaz climbed below her, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. Every 20 feet or so, the backup lights flickered, casting long, skeletal shadows on the walls. And behind them, the hum persisted. low and rhythmic. Almost like a chant now, rising in volume the higher they climbed. You. You stopped cold. She looked down. Diaz was staring up at her, eyes wide. You heard that? He nodded slowly. It said your name. I think something followed us. From below, there was a click, metal bending. Then a scrape. Like fingers, or claws, gripping the rungs. You turned upward. Go. Go now. They climbed faster. Rung by rung. The weight of dread grew heavier the closer they got to the next level. Diaz's boot slipped once, and you reached down, grabbing his wrist just in time. The walls around them began to ripple. Not shake, ripple. Like the metal was becoming fluid again. A faint, terrible voice echoed, not with sound, but with memory. We remember your dreams. You cried out as a face, her own, bloomed from the wall beside her, lips curled in agony. They passed another level's doorway. You paused. Help me pry it open. Diaz wedged his combat knife into the seam as you kicked the panel. It gave with a groan of protest, revealing a hallway scorched black, the air thick with dust. As they crawled through, something below roared, a soundless vibration that shook their bones, not their ears. They collapsed onto the floor of level C2, breathing hard. The lights here were dead. The power grid must have collapsed in the explosion. You checked her watch. The second hand wasn't moving. Diaz noticed. Time's not working right. We're still in its range, she muttered. Even without the cube. They stood up, scanning their surroundings. A long hallway, littered with overturned stretchers, glass, dried pools of blood. The infirmary level. Diaz pointed to a map on the wall, cracked and burnt. If we move through Med Bay, we can access a secondary lift at the far end. You nodded. Let's go. Quietly. As they moved through the darkened corridors, the silence around them became a pressure, the kind you feel deep underwater. Like something immense was waiting for them just beyond the next door. And behind them, from the shaft, came the sound of climbing. Not footsteps. Not breathing. But the sound of many hands. Gripping metal. Pulling upward. You and Diaz pressed forward into the infirmary, their boots crunching over scattered glass vials and broken surgical tools. The walls were blistered, peeling like old skin, and the ceiling light sparked weakly overhead, casting ghost-like shadows that stretched and retracted unnaturally. Diaz swept his flashlight in a slow arc. I don't like this. You didn't either. Medical beds were overturned, as if something had crawled out from beneath them. One gurney still had restraints hanging from it, twisted and broken. Blood trailed from the headrest to the floor in a smeared arc, stopping at the wall, where fingerprints, human and not, decorated the surface in frantic, spiraling patterns. You whispered, someone tried to draw something. A symbol, maybe. But the blood had long since dried into a rust-colored crust, obscuring any clear design. As they approached the nurse's station, a soft ding echoed from behind the counter. Diaz flinched. What was that? Another ding. It came from a call button on the counter, blinking green. Then another. And another. Soon, all the call lights in the room were blinking rapidly. Ding. 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 Go. Go. You hissed, grabbing Diaz by the collar. They sprinted through the infirmary toward the hallway exit, but just as they reached the door, it slammed shut, metal groaning as it locked in place. Diaz turned, flashlight shaking. No. No, no, no. A voice crackled through the intercom above them. You. Diaz, please report to surgery. It was O'Neill's voice. But warped. Slowed. Each syllable reversed and played forward again, like a VHS tape mangled and rewind. The lights dimmed, and something moved behind the curtains across the room. Not footsteps. A dragging sound. Then another. You grabbed a defibrillator paddle from a nearby wall, gripping it like a club. Diaz unslung his rifle, though the barrel trembled in his hands. The curtain parted slightly, only a few inches. Enough to reveal feet. Pale, stitched feet, toes curled and twitching. You didn't wait. She sprinted across the room, swung the paddle, and ripped the curtain away. The bed was empty. But the ceiling above it now bulged downward, as if something massive and wet had climbed into the crawlspace. From the vents, a breathless voice hissed. "Surge or Jerry." Suddenly, the emergency door unlocked with a loud clank. Without speaking, they bolted out into the hallway, not daring to look back. As they ran, you felt it again, that oppressive pressure, not behind them now but inside her head. A rhythmic hum, pulsing between her ears, whispering alien syllables she didn't recognize but somehow understood. They passed the last corner before the secondary lift when Diaz stumbled. His flashlight clattered. You turned, he was staring at a glass wall. Behind it was the operating room. Its light was on. And inside it was O'Neill. Standing. Eyes open. Skin bloated and green. Smiling. O'Neill's eyes locked onto you through the glass. He didn't blink. He didn't move. His smile remained frozen like a taxidermied grimace, lips too wide, cheeks stretched unnaturally. Diaz raised his rifle instinctively, but you grabbed his arm. No. She pressed closer to the glass. That's not him anymore. Inside the operating theater, a second figure stirred in the shadows behind O'Neill. It moved oddly, like it had too many joints, its limbs bending in unnatural angles, tendons creaking as it took slow steps toward the light. Yu's breath caught. It's wearing one of the hazard suits. The figure emerged. The helmet of the biosuit was cracked open. Inside, where a face should have been, there was only movement, something crawling, writhing, multiplying behind the glass. It reached toward O'Neill and gently rested a hand on his shoulder. Then O'Neill began to convulse. Veins along his neck burst. His eyes rolled back, and black ichor gushed from his nose and mouth. But he never stopped smiling. You yanked Diaz back. We need to move. Now. They turned and sprinted toward the secondary lift, but the hallway had changed. The walls were closer, sloping inward like a funnel. Pipes now throbbed like arteries, pulsing with a sickly light. The building itself had transformed, as if reacting to their movement. The lift at the end flickered into view, doors wide open, too inviting. Diaz hesitated. Trap? Don't care, you barked, pulling him in. The doors shut behind them. Inside the lift, there were no buttons. Just a panel glowing with one word. Sublevel, X. What the hell is sublevel X? Diaz asked. You didn't answer. Her throat had gone dry. The lift began to descend. Slowly. Silently. They stood motionless, the fluorescent light above them dimming, flickering. After what felt like hours, the lift came to a halt. The doors remained shut for a moment, then hissed open. They were greeted by cold. Not just temperature, but an absence of life. The air itself seemed sterile. Smothering. The corridor before them was perfectly clean, the walls seamless, metallic, and eerily smooth. It didn't look like any part of the base they'd ever seen. Everything was white, floor, ceiling, walls. As if someone had scrubbed it free of history. There were no markings. No equipment. No signs of life. Except one thing. A trail of bloody footprints leading forward. Small ones. Bare feet. Child-sized. You and Diaz exchanged a look, then followed, weapons raised. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally, bouncing back to them warped, delayed, as if the hallway refused to accept sound the way it should. Then, ahead in the corridor, a door opened by itself. A soft child's voice whispered, "We're almost ready for you." The hallway led them into a large observation chamber. At its center was a glass cube, 10 feet on each side, bathed in pale blue light. Inside the cube, a child stood motionless. A girl. Maybe 9 years old. She wore a tattered hospital gown and no shoes. Her hair was long, dark, and matted with streaks of red. Her skin was far too pale, almost translucent, like she hadn't seen sunlight in years. You instinctively raised her defibrillator paddle like a shield. Diaz kept his rifle aimed low but ready. The girl lifted her head. Her eyes, they weren't eyes. They were black voids, completely hollow, and within them floated hundreds, maybe thousands, of tiny metallic filaments, moving like insect wings. Diaz whispered, "Is she human?" You stepped forward. "What is this place?" The girl didn't answer. But something behind her did. From the shadows in the back of the cube, an arm slithered forward, long, too long, jointed in multiple directions. It looked both mechanical and organic, bone exposed beneath metal plates, tendons twitching between wires. Then came the voice again, not the girl's this time, but O'Neill's, speaking through the intercom above them. "She was the first. We thought we could contain it, isolate the intelligence. But it learned." More lights flickered on, illuminating hundreds of glass chambers lining the walls, each holding something different. One held a body curled into fetal position, head replaced with a surgical array of sensors. Another held a dog, emaciated, with dozens of human-like hands sprouting from its torso. A third chamber was filled with what looked like faces, dozens of them, pressed up against the glass, mouths moving silently. You turned to Diaz, voice trembling. They weren't running tests on the anomaly. They were trying to communicate with it. The girl in the cube suddenly stepped forward. She placed a hand on the glass. And cracks spiderwebbed out instantly. Diaz took a step back. "We need to." But he stopped. His eyes rolled upward, and he collapsed with a thud, convulsing violently. His limbs bent in wrong directions. Veins along his temple bulged and burst. You fell to her knees beside him. "Diaz. Diaz." His pupils dilated completely, turning jet black. From his mouth spilled not blood, but tiny silver threads, wriggling like worms, trying to reach her. She backed away, breath shallow, eyes wide. From above, the intercom came to life once more. "Once it touches the mind, there's no firewall." The cube exploded outward with a shriek of warping glass and light. The girl stepped forward. She didn't walk. She glided, hair suspended as if underwater. You raised the defibrillator paddle, but her limbs felt heavy, like gravity itself was being rewritten. The girl stopped inches away. She whispered, not with sound, but directly into Yu's thoughts. "You are the final key." Yu screamed. And the world went white. You woke up flat on her back. The ceiling was unfamiliar, sleek, white, curving slightly downward. Fluorescent light hummed above her. Everything was still. Clean. Cold. She sat up slowly. Her gear was gone. Her wrists were strapped with soft restraints. She was in a medical gown, sitting on a sterile bed. A mirror covered the wall opposite her. Or at least, it looked like a mirror. Her head throbbed with distant voices. Not memories. Not thoughts. Something else. Whispering. Layered. Constant. "The final key, we're through now." She opened it. You pushed herself up, ignoring the restraint as it peeled away like paper. No alarms triggered. No guards. No doctors. She crossed to the mirror and pressed her palm against it. Her reflection didn't follow. It stared at her. Expressionless. Eyes black. Then it smiled. "Hello again," it said with her voice. You stumbled back. A hiss behind her. The wall had opened, revealing a sterile corridor. The voice, her voice, beckoned again. "They're waiting for you." She stepped into the hallway, barefoot. A distant rumble shook the ground, like something massive turning beneath the earth. Emergency sirens flickered red against the white. She passed rooms of abandoned tests, all the chambers empty now. No creatures. No scientists. Only equipment still running. Each screen flashed one word. Exfiltration. The hall split into two directions. One path led to a staircase labeled Command Level. The other, an open hatch labeled Blackout Protocol, Vault 1A. She chose Vault 1A. She descended into silence. This level was different. Older. It looked like the original foundation of the base, rusted steel walls, leaking pipes, the hum of generators decades out of date. At the far end, a massive glass door. She touched the panel beside it. A voice, a human one, crackled to life over a hidden speaker. Dr. Yu. We see you made it. Good. We only need one survivor. She froze. Who is this? Doesn't matter. What matters is the anomaly used you. Your mind provided access. You bridged the barrier. You clenched her fists. Where is Diaz? Gone. Absorbed. As we all will be, if you don't finish what you started. The door creaked open. Inside was a control station and a single chair facing an enormous wall of glowing black glass. Something writhed beneath it, formless, endless. Like a wound in space itself. She approached the terminal. A single red button awaited her. Blackout Protocol, Permanent Base Severance. Warning, this will destroy all data, structures, and biological matter across facility grounds. Continue? The voices in her head held. The child's whisper rose again. You're ours. Don't abandon us. You looked into the black glass. She saw herself, thousands of times over, being born, decaying, consumed. In every version, she failed. But in this one, she could choose. She slammed the button. Instantly, the ground lurched. Lights exploded overhead. Steam vented from every wall. The hum became a roar. A countdown began. 30. 29. 28. You backed away from the terminal. She looked up at the screen. For a brief second, less than a blink, she saw every face the anomaly had taken flash across it. Then everything went white. 2 years later. A classified drone hovered over the Alaskan mountain range where Sable 3 once stood. There was nothing left. Just crater glass. No structure. No ruins. No signal. The anomaly had been wiped out. Or so they believed. As the drone rotated for departure, its lens caught a shadow, brief, crawling beneath the ice. And just before the feed cut to static, a small voice whispered across the transmission. She didn't finish the story.